Across our country, we do have our challenges with perceptions and realities between our law enforcement community and the communities that they serve.
The officer did pin me to the ground, handcuff me, put me in the back of the car.
If we're focusing on a contact between a police officer and what is believed to be a suspect or an investigative lead, I think we've seen a tremendous amount of attention given to that interaction.
When people have encounters with police officers, and whether we tend to think in terms of those less positive encounters with a police officer, there's ways of handling that.
In general, across law enforcement agencies, but in particular with the Phoenix Police Department, we are recognizing, as are other law enforcement agencies, the benefits of bridging gaps by having civilians work within the department to work with our sworn officers on how we dialogue and discuss what we do from a law enforcement perspective with community members. And by that, that simply means this: translating what law enforcement does from an operational and a tactical perspective into layman terms to the community, and then translating from the community back in a tactical and an operational perspective to law enforcement about what they do and how they do what they do. It really is that notion of when folks understand why you do what you do, may not always like what is going on, but at least understand what is being done and why it's being done. That's how you create a foundation for mutual respect, mutual understanding. That's how you work on demystifying what's in front of the badge as well as what's behind the badge.
My first altercation with law enforcement that I remembered, where an officer actually drew his sidearm on me, where a Garcia's restaurant, where the Croc Center now sits off 16th Street and 14th Street and Broadway, there was a violent armed robbery that had taken place. The suspect description was a light-skinned black male wearing all blue, white tennis shoes. And there's all my friends playing ball like we do all the time in the summertime. And lo and behold, while I'm looking at them, it was amazing that this firearm is being pointed at me, and there was an officer behind it. And the officer immediately told me, "You need to get down, you're being taken into custody." It was dirt, I didn't want to get down. I felt what I had done wrong. And all my friends, which by the way, all my friends that were over at the park were all very serious and involved gang members, all of them, were all telling me the same thing: "You need to get down right now, just get down." And at that time, I remembered everything inside of me wanted to fight against that advice. I did get down, and the officer did pin me to the ground, handcuff me, put me in the back of the car, and then took me over to Garcia's. Well, after all was said and done, they figured out I didn't do it. The woman that had been robbed there said that it wasn't me. She was positive it wasn't me, but it did seem, I did fit the description, but that's not me.
As it relates to our role in law enforcement, we must always ensure that we are performing at a high standard. We hold ourselves to a very high standard related to that interaction, and we have to follow the laws of our country, the laws of our state, the laws of our cities, and then we also have to follow protocols and procedures that are implemented by our individual departments and by the Phoenix Police Department. We set very high standards as it relates to that interaction with those. On the flip side, these incidents happen in a very dynamic situation. They happen rapidly. We are asking officers to make split-second decisions that have the ability to take life and have their own lives taken. So when you put all of that into a pot, it becomes a very dynamic situation.
Some of the expectations that are placed on law enforcement is that when they engage with a person, and I'm not talking about engaging in ways that are saying they're looking for conflict, but any kind of engagement with another person. So whether they're going up and talking to someone during a stop, or just throughout the normal course of duties, greeting a person maybe in a restaurant, there's certain rules that apply to police officers, and then there's an expectation within the leadership of the police departments that officers conduct themselves a certain way, and they have certain behavioral expectations, and they're held to those standards. On the other side, a person who is more of a criminal, who has that history of acting out, maybe has had some time in jail, they operate by rules as well, but their rules are different, and societal rules aren't necessarily applying to them. So in their head, their rules are is I have the right to do what I want to do or need to do to protect my own best wishes and the outcomes for myself. My rules that I follow in that thinking are completely different, and it's not going to be something that was decided by society. It was something that was decided by me. So my thinking is it's perfectly within my rule set as a person who has a criminal history to fight back when an officer says, stop resisting. The officer has a point where he or she has to make a decision about how much further this is going to go, so I'm still following my regulations, whereas that criminal, he does not have that same rule set that they have to follow.
That is why it is so imperative for us to ensure that we are constantly training, that we are constantly evolving, and that we are keeping our skills as sharp and as professional as possible to be able to handle that.
When conducting traffic stops, you might notice officers are very direct, are very cautious. You watch when they approach your car, they're looking in your back seat, they're looking at your hands, they're looking through the window, and they seem to be hyper alert. And that's the way we train officers. We train them to be hyper alert, because when you pull that car over, you never know what you're going to encounter when you walk up to the door. It could be someone coming home from work, it could be someone taking kids to a soccer practice, or it could be a criminal who just committed a criminal act. You just never know.
One of the biggest things we're striving to do is reinforce the concepts of de-escalation. And that's a hard thing to do on a lot of levels.
The officer stopped me to ask me a couple of questions. That right then is kind of in my face, but if I start berating him and telling him he doesn't have the right to do this and he needs to go and do his job, it now really truly is in my face. And that could have negative repercussions for me.
Good morning, sir.
What the heck did I do?
Sir,
Hey, I gotta go to work. Is this gonna take any time long?
well, if you just bear with me, then it's not going to take too much time.
What did I do?
Well, there's a stop sign right here at 61st Avenue and Encanto,
Yeah,
and
I
you
know,
didn't
I
stop
live
for
here.
it. Yeah.
I came to a complete stop. I know I came to a complete stop.
Well, you didn't stop completely for that stop sign, sir,
I
and that's
did.
why I'm stopping.
No,
you.
I stopped.
Well, sir.
I looked both ways by the fact too.
Well, sir, the car, the wheels were still going, and the car was still moving, and that's the reason for the stop. I need your driver's license, your registration, and your proof
You
of
gonna give me a
insurance.
ticket now?
Well, sir, I need to talk to you about it. Do you
No,
have your driver's
no,
license, your registration?
I gotta go. If I'm on my way to work, you're targeting me for some reason. I don't know why, but
No,
you
sir.
know what? Yeah, let me have your boss's number.
King 32, can I get it back up to my location?
Yeah, have your supervisor come out here too.
Well, I'm going to have the supervisor come out
you
here,
guys are
but I am the
targeting me. This
supervisor
is
for
wrong.
this area.
I
I
came
need-
to a stop.
Okay, sir, I need your
No, you're
driver's
targeting me
license,
for some
your
reason.
registration, and your insurance.
So officers are always going to be hyper vigilant when they walk up to your car. And all I ask is that you understand that, and you understand why the officers might seem short, why they might be very direct, why they might ask for all your information before they offer you any explanation on why they stopped you. And I ask you just to be patient, to understand why we do what we do.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm Sergeant Woods of the Phoenix Police Department. The reason why I'm stopping you is because you didn't stop for the stop sign at 61st Avenue and Encanto.
Oh, I didn't? I thought I did.
No, your wheels will continue to go, and the car never stopped before you passed through that intersection.
Oh, okay.
All right. You have your driver's license, your registration, and your proof of insurance.
I do. I have my license in my wallet. Can I reach for my wallet?
Go ahead and get your wallet out.
The registration insurance is in the glove box. Can I grab that too?
Go ahead and get your driver's license out first, and then go ahead and get your registration and your insurance.
Here you go, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, the reason why we're stopping you is because we've been getting some complaints about people running through that stop sign, so we're out here doing some checking to make sure that people stop completely for that stop sign.
Okay.
It looks like everything here is in order, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a warning here today. We just want you to stop here at the stop sign. We have lots of children crossing the street to get to the park, and we just want to ensure that they're safe, and we don't want anybody to get hurt.
Okay.
Here's all your stuff,
Thank you, sir.
and you go ahead and have a nice day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
We want training to become repetition, because in repetition, it just becomes muscle memory, and it just becomes a reaction. Because if you're ambushed, or you're having to make that decision, if you're having to think overtly about that high risk, low frequency situation, you're going to get yourself hurt, or you're not going to perform at the level that we would expect that officer to perform at.
Okay, you're going to respond to a canine search in reference to an armed robbery suspect.
Let me see your hands! Stop by the dog! Let me see your hands! Stop by the dog! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Stop by the dog! Stop by the dog!
All right, so why did you shoot that individual?
Because he threatened my life, he pointed a gun at me.
Okay, notice that most of your hits are up towards the head area.
Yep.
Shooting over the dog.
Yep.
Okay. All right, very good.
So through training and repetition, try doing something once and see how great you become at it. We talk about the 10,000 hour rule, and that rule is very important as it relates to the amount of repetitions we want officers to partake in to make sure that that training component is then applied in the community during that contact, because we do have very strict policies and procedures related to how we want to perform. And we do all that for the integrity of the police department, for the integrity of the city, and for the integrity of our commitment to serving and being those guardians of your community. Let's not forget that these police officers and these suspects, there's humanness involved in this. And we can give that officer all the world-class training that we can. We can put the filtering process through the hiring process. We have a very rigid and strict hiring process to put those individuals through multiple assessments to filter that person to be able to have the best candidate as possible to become that police officer. It's a tremendous honor and privilege, and it takes a rare person. And then once we apply all that training regimen to that individual, we still cannot take out one factor, and that factor is that they are human.
Sir, Phoenix Police Department, turn around for me. Turn around for me. Hey! Put it down! Put it down!
There is a bio-natural fight or flight mechanics that happen within every human as it relates to a life and death situation, or as it relates to combat, or as it relates to just having an adrenaline dump based on the totality of what can be a very significant incident. How we overcome some of that, how we try to deal with that, because I think we have seen scenarios around the country related to officers that are involved in force or involved in contacts that have allowed, or the body has overcome some of the training in the mind, and then we have what could be looked at as tragic incidents. And so what we must always focus on is the body's ability to handle that stress, the reality of the body's ability in fight or flight, or in combat, or in agitated situations. And again, I'll revert back to the training component related to repetition. We talk about breathing. We talk about taking in the totality of your training experience and applying it in a very regimented way as it relates to that contact.
I know, but I was just now behind the party.
One of the most important things that we do in our business is the gathering of evidence. We're fact finders. We're not here to portray judgment. We are the gatherer of the facts in this business, and we put those facts together as comprehensively and as accurately as possible and as concisely as possible. And then it's our job to be able to take that and put it before the community in the form of a jury, and before people that have been given that jurisdiction to handle that, that's judges and courts, and then let them make a determination of guilt.
Where it says invoice, that's your barcode.
So when you see officers receive training at the academy, or they come out into the field in the field training program, one of the tremendous points of emphasis is the care and diligence that we handle that evidence with.
If it's two different report numbers, then you have two different report numbers, and then you have the barcodes underneath that.
And if we don't do it with the utmost integrity and with the utmost due diligence related to how we gather it, how we protect the chain of custody of it, how we preserve it, and then how we analyze it. That's a huge thing nowadays as this business and forensics becomes more scientific. How we analyze that data and that evidence is tremendously important, and we must treasure that role.
The South Phoenix I grew up in completely changed from where I was as a small boy to when you're talking the late 80s, early 90s, where gangs became just a hot commodity around here, and the level of violence, the subsequent violence that came behind just drugs and so forth in the community really took its toll on the community as a whole. I found that it was an easy release for me to get into the street life and to begin dabbling in crime, all sorts of crime, from petty snatch and grab robberies to a few bank robberies to just across the board selling a few drugs here and there. It's just the life of what you do when you're involved in crime and you're doing lots of crime and you're hanging out with a lot of guys. Now most people would look at me from the outside and ask, why would a guy who's going to Brophy for 2 years, he graduated St. Mary's in 1992, he went to St. Agnes Elementary, well, how is he getting in all this trouble? I came up from an extremely violent home. I mean, I would say that it was domestic violence, but I mean, for me, it was just, I never thought I'd have to fight my own father. I mean, it was never something I ever thought I would have to do. I mean, it's one thing to say domestic violence. It's another thing to say that your father is trying to knock you out and I'm trying to knock my father out. It's just two different things, where I'm having to wake up every morning to pull him off my mother. And not to mention, I was, you know, just coming through abuse across the board. So I found outlets. As time went on, the crimes only got worse, and as you find out when you're involved in criminal activity, because there is no 401k plan, there is no retirement plan with it, and because there is no real focus or end game involved in criminal activity, like most people, you finally get popped because you can only be lucky for so long, and and cops only have to get lucky once. That's the way it works. And finally, I was arrested at the age of 19 for the first time, and I went in for 5 years for an armed robbery and a kidnapping. I signed a plea agreement for those 2 charges. I went in as an extremely violent young man, and I came out as an extremely violent young man. And prison didn't do anything but kind of instill those same qualities I had when I was in. I didn't learn anything. I was just so lost, and it was a dark time in my life. And so I ended up staying out for 1 year, and then getting in trouble again, got caught again. And this time I took it to trial and I lost, and I received 12 years. That was behind another armed robbery. What ended up happening was September 11th, 2001, 9/11 came around. And that was a morning that changed my entire life. It's what happened. I was a criminal if you would have caught me at 5 o'clock that morning. However, sitting in that prison cell in Winslow, Arizona, and our country being attacked, it was the first time I had ever seen the reality on television of what exactly a first responder was. And I had no idea that that meant police officers that run into burning buildings and crumbling buildings. I had no idea that meant firefighters that do the same type of thing. I had no idea that it meant rescue workers. I had no idea that meant the average everyday citizen that just takes it upon themselves to give of themselves to save someone else, or potentially give of their own lives altogether. At the end of the day, I don't have animosity because it's a life decision I made at the time, and I don't make excuses for it because, well, what is excuses going to do? I would essentially be lying. I've never had a bad altercation where I ever came out on the raw end of a deal with a law enforcement, never drugged through the street or beat up or smacked around. When an officer tells me to sit still, that's exactly what I used to do, and I lived and fought another day, and yeah, until I didn't want to fight anymore.
We are all the sum total of our experiences. And so we all bring different experiences to interactions that we have. Community brings their experiences to the interactions they have with law enforcement. Law enforcement brings their experiences into the interactions that they have with the community they are sworn to protect and serve.
So I'm Frantz Beasley, and I am the current president and extremely proud co-founder of a Phoenix-based nonprofit called Arizona Common Ground, or AZ Common Ground. What we provide are, we work with youth and adults that are either one, exiting the jail and prison system, or two, have been convicted of felony or misdemeanor convictions. And we provide post-release services for those individuals, from life skills training to work readiness training, a great deal of mentorship, and job placement assistance. And we've done that since 2010 now. How do I work with law enforcement officers today? It's just because it's more of a privilege. I'm a first responder. That's how I see myself. And I'm working alongside of other first responders. In other words, I realize my responsibility and my role within society. My role is not to be oppositional to public servants and the first responders. Because I myself am a first responder. It's almost as though I'm working against my own team. And that's how my paradigm shifted.
So what I see in terms of the relationship between the community and law enforcement is simply this. The vast majority of individuals who are out there in the community, the residents, the citizens, the vast majority, quite frankly, of the men and women who make the sacrifice to wear that uniform and put on that badge all want the same things. That is to live, to work, to play, and to raise children and grandchildren in safe and healthy environments. Both sides want the bad folks arrested and appropriate justice to be provided.
When a child sits in a classroom and listens to their teacher, and then introduce a police officer who comes in and then teaches a lesson out of a book, I think at some point this child looks at that officer like an extension of the teacher, and they're not truly creating that one-on-one engagement to understand what a police officer does every day.
I was recently in a Starbucks getting a coffee, and I had a child come up to me and touch me. He touched me on my forearm. And I looked down and I introduced myself and I asked him his name and he provided me with his name. And then he proceeded, sharp little guy, to ask me a few questions. He asked me if I slept at night. He asked me if I listened to music. He asked me if I ate. He started to ask me a series of questions that started a realization in my mind that this child didn't think I was human, that he thought I was this robot or this thing that he had seen in movies and stuff. And so that was an awakening on a lot of levels for me related to the perceptions our youth have of this role in society.
I think the earlier the better for us to engage with school-age children in non-enforcement contacts, to let them know that we're human. We're just like their mom and dads. We just happen to wear a uniform and drive a police car when we go to work. We go home, we have families, we have children as well. And as soon as we allow those kids to see us as human, as people, not as uniform-wearing robots, we're going to open up those lines of communication. We're going to break down those walls. We're going to demystify the entire police profession. And again, that's going to make our community stronger. That's why over the last 1.5 to 2 years, the Phoenix Police Department has been actively looking for non-traditional ways to engage the young members of our community. We've done that through things such as our Explorer program, through our Wake Up Clubs. Last summer we hosted a youth training academy.
You're going to get a little glimpse into what we do. And so what I want you to do is I want you to ask lots of questions. Okay, this isn't CSI Miami or NYPD Blue. This is the real thing. So ask questions. We want to demystify what we do and understand that the job we do can't be done without you and your support. Community, that's what it's all about.
By routinely engaging our school-age children that live in our community through non-enforcement contacts, we're just building those relationships. And what happens is as those students grow, I would like to believe they will continue to gain a better understanding, because we're not just going to engage them when they're 6 or 7. We're going to engage them when they're 6 or 7. We're going to engage them when they're 8 and 9. We're going to engage them when they're 10 to 12. We're going to keep engaging them. Hopefully we'll engage them the rest of their lives through our different programs, through our different activities. And what that does, it builds a mutual respect.
One of the reasons we put this together is to show young folks that they're your friends, they're not adversaries. And to get to know them, they're human beings just like you and I doing a job. Far too many young people in our communities, their goal is to go to prison, believe it or not, to go to jail. That's what they want to do. You're here for a different reason.
Let's talk about the taser that we got here. This is our Taser X2. You want one probe kind of here at the midsection and another probe down here. That allows for you to use the large muscles of the hips and abs to cause that intramuscular incapacitation.
What are you doing in my yard? Why are you always harassing me?
We're not, but you need to drop the rod.
I'm not dropping this.
No, drop your wood.
You can come get it from me.
No. Okay.
Don't make me do to you what I just did to her.
What did you do to her?
Don't worry about it. You'll find out in a minute.
No, we need to talk to her.
No.
Drop it.
You missed.
Violent and maybe have weapons, and they've used that weapon on somebody? Oh yeah, definitely. It is definitely a stressful type of situations.
The reality of law enforcement's role in engaging youth is it's an obligation. It is an absolute obligation in this business to make sure that we are engaging youth, because what is the other option? First of all, avoiding doesn't work in life. Try it. If you avoid that interaction as a law enforcement agency, you're going to fail. The other thing is, if you don't, somebody else will. There are people in those communities, bad people, gang members, horrible influences that will fill those cracks, that so many things that you're doing, Dwight, at MRC, so many things that the schools are doing, so many things that we're trying to do. If we don't fill those cracks with positiveness and what is righteous and what is lawful and normal and healthy, others are going to fill it with bad things.
When I see an individual who is wearing a uniform, I'm trusting that they are here and they're here protecting and serving me and keeping the bad people away from me so that I can live and work and play and raise kids in a healthy and safe environment.
My fear is not the community. My fear is the community's reaction to the one or two bad apples within the law enforcement department that seems to always be the ones that seem to just screw up things on a social media level that literally is just, it just sends shockwaves through the community. And that is the part that I don't like, because it overshadows the majority of what is going on every day within our country, where officers are working hard to make sure that they're ensuring increasing quality of life for all of us.
Law enforcement's role in society, it's a complicated and long one. I'll tell you that without law enforcement, Plato discussed this in the Republic. He talked about the role of the guardian. The guardian is the guardian of democracy, and without those guardians defending that democracy, society ceased to exist.